This podcast is brought to you by the American Enterprise Institute.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, review, and share.
Thanks for listening. Here's our show.
What the hell is going on?
What's really going on?
We said, what the hell happened?
You don't have to know what the hell is on it.
They see what's going on. I don't know what's going on. What is going on?
We must find out what is going on.
Hi, I'm Danielle Pletka.
I'm Mark Thiessen.
Welcome to our podcast, What the Hell is Going On? Mark, what the hell is actually going on today?
What the hell is going on is we're doing a little bit of a different pod today because, as you've said, normally the premise of this pod is that we figure out an issue where everybody's asking what the hell is going on, and then we go out and find the world's expert on it, and we find out what the hell is going on, and then we argue about it, right? But today we're doing something different. We have Megyn Kelly on the pod, and we're talking about Trump 2.0 and Megyn Kelly 2.0 because she's got this great podcast. And Megyn Kelly made my career. She plucked me out of obscurity when I was a young writer at the Washington Post, just coming out of the Bush administration, and put me on her daytime show on Fox News. And then when she got in her primetime show, The Kelly File, she pulled me up with her, and I'm just I owe a lot of my career to her. And as you point out, I owe a lot of my career to you too.
There you go. So this is really a podcast about gratitude.
Exactly. And so this is the first time I get to interview her. And so I'm just thrilled to have her on the pod. And we're going to check in with Megyn about the second Trump presidency. How is it different from the first one? What is she hoping for? What does she see? How did Trump do it? And also the media landscape. She's sort of a pioneer in this new media, this digital media that is challenging the old established media. She's hugely successful. How did she do it? And what does that mean for American democracy going forward?
Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the questions that we asked her, but what I want to do, which we usually don't do, is to let everybody listen to our conversation, see what she thinks, and then maybe you and I can talk a little bit, because I think it's interesting. Megyn's very optimistic, which is, I think, what makes her a go-getter. As you know, I am not a glass half full kind of a girl, so I want to talk about the glass half empty.
Glass
that I'm
is pretty full
about.
in her these days.
Her
I
glass
think.
is, listen, I mean, she's doing great personally, but I think she's just very optimistic about the direction that we're headed in. And, there's a conversation to be had about that, and, room for lots of different perspectives. But you asked her a good question about siloing of people who don't agree with each other. I thought that was great. But let's listen to what Megyn says. So I can't believe I'm giving her an introduction. But for those of you living under a rock who don't know who Megyn Kelly is, she is the founder of the absolutely beautifully named Devil May Care Media. She hosts her eponymous show, The Megyn Kelly Show. She was a journalist at Fox News from 2004 to 2017. She moderated 5 presidential debates, including the Republican primary in 2015. From 2017 to 2018, as she describes it, a hot minute, she worked at NBC News. She has been named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people. And she has a memoir. Again, she has a real way with these titles. Settle for More, which was a #1 New York Times bestseller.
Here's our interview. Well, Megyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you. So first of all, it's great to have you because I miss you. I loved working with you. And 2, this is the first time I get to interview you.
I know.
Never happened
it's
before.
Such a role reversal. I hope your audience knows. I feel like I found you. I found you years and years ago, and you were brilliant. It was so obvious, but you hadn't done a lot of TV. And TV, for all of us, is an acquired skill. You just have to do more of it to get better. So he would come out there, Danny, with his little clipboard, and he would just kind of like look at his notes. But you could tell he was so smart. I'm like, this guy is a diamond in the rough, and I am here for it. And it was so great. And at the beginning, people were like, who's that guy? Why are you having him on? And by the end, they all wanted to steal him from me. I was like, get out, he's mine. And now I can't have him anywhere because he's signed with Fox, and Fox won't let its people come on my show.
Which is, well, I have opinions about that. But then again, I'm signed with NBC, so they don't care.
Yeah,
I'm stuck with Danny.
So you're stuck with me. Exactly. Thank you. Megyn,
anyway, he's a star.
You may not know that I hired Mark in 1994-5 at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so he owes a lot to the women in his life.
Yes.
Oh, this explains a lot. He's very respectful about the women. You never have to remind Mark. He never has an errant step. I appreciate it.
Exactly.
Okay. So
All right, Mark
I'm with the
Substance.
two strong women who made me what I am today. Thank you.
Okay.
Taking all the credit.
But anyway, well, speaking about memory lane, so I was with you in 2015 because had me on your show, the Kelly File, back then pretty regularly, and I was with you at the 2015 presidential debates when you had your moment with Donald Trump, and here we are in 2025, and you were speaking at a Trump rally.
Oh.
Talk to us a little bit about your transformation and his transformation to some extent. I think he's changed a lot since back then.
So much has happened. It's funny because in a way, Trump and I are back to where we started, which was we were friendly. We were always very friendly for years prior to that 15 debate. You know, he was a man about town and I was a journalist at Fox, which he watched religiously. And he'd send me, like the way he does with everybody now, articles about me, like signed Donald Trump. I'm like, okay. He'd call me after segments and say he loved this or that. So anyway, I went to a couple things for him. So we were friends, and then came that debate. And, you know, the nature of journalist and presidential candidate is not friends. It's adversarial, which it was. And then it got extra adversarial, as the world knows. And then I didn't much like him, nor did he like me for about a year. Mine wasn't, I just didn't like him in reaction to him not liking me and being very public about it. Just over time, I was like, okay, my feelings are changing about him. And then it was just détente. You know, I went to Trump Tower. We kind of stood down on the weirdness that was happening between us. And I congratulated him when he won. And then nothing. Like, we really didn't stay in touch over the first presidency. And then the second 4 years, I did launch my show right at the end of his first term. So the Biden term is kind of, I don't want to overstate it, but really when I fell for Trump, you know, like it's not love, it's not that, but it's just when I really began to appreciate him, having just lived through the 4 years of Biden. You just missed Trump so much. It kind of began during Kavanaugh, when he stood by Kavanaugh. I really respected that. And any other president would have caved. It was just very wrong what they were doing to him. And just the Russiagate was such BS. There was just so much. But in the beginning of the Trump first term, I was still mad enough at him, or like distasteful about him, that I wasn't really feeling sympathy for him. You know, I was like, whatever, I don't know. It's bullshit, but I'm not going to get involved. And I really wasn't involved. I was like doing culture segments over on NBC for about 2 minutes before they canned me. And then I was sitting on my couch. There was like kind of no way to do anything. And then finally, when I launched my show, it's funny, if you go back and listen to the early days of the Megyn Kelly show in 2020, I was like lukewarm on Trump. You know, I was very open-minded to his policies, and I did vote for him, which I was pretty clear on the fact that I was supporting him. But, you know, it wasn't like a matter of life and death that he win. But by the end of Biden, I truly felt that it was a matter of life and death that Trump win, and now we're friends again.
It's really interesting to listen to you talk about this evolution because, I mean, I think that absent the context that we've all lived through, and for me, actually, it all goes back to Obama. Like, if we had not had 8 years of an imperial presidency under Obama, if we had not had things that were good for us in his eyes rammed down our throats, we wouldn't have been ready for Donald Trump in 2016. And we kind of really weren't ready for his style then. But as you say, after 4 years of Joe Biden, of being lied to by the media about his mental well-being, about him not doing even the things that he said he was supposed to do, it's no surprise that people kind of turned around to welcome Trump with open arms in 2024. And I think a lot of the American public mirrors your evolution there. It's interesting.
I think so, because it's like, you had 4 years of Biden where if you wanted to ruin the country, what would you do differently? You know, if it was your active goal as an enemy who managed to somehow become president, what would you do differently? And so it was infuriating. He was absolutely the worst president of my lifetime. And I was alive when Carter was in there. And I have a real loathing of him because thanks to his policies, his dishonesty, I do believe his corruption. And it just kind of put perspective on Trump, didn't it? Like, who cares about his tweets and how he likes to troll people? Who cares? What matters is what this guy is doing at our southern border and to children and to the bureaucracy. I mean, like, you could go down the list.
Well, you can go down the list, but I mean, again, one of the things that you talk about, and I know people really enjoy, is that you are, first of all, you're really straightforward. You just said, I voted for Trump. When was the last time you heard an anchor on a major broadcast tell you who they voted for? And the thing is, I back in the Ice Age, I also used to be a journalist, and maybe it was the Little Ice Age. I got to be careful now because people are like nodding. I see that. But even then, when I was young, I realized that journalists had a very clear perspective, but they were lying about it. And now it's really become entrenched in the business in so many ways. Just talk a little bit about how you think this happened.
Well, I mean, I think it's the only way now because the media bias toward the left has been completely exposed, and it's sickening to most people who are center or rightward of centered. And so it's the reason why this digital ecosystem was invented, popped up, grew, whatever your word is for it. But I would say taken over at this point because people were so sick of the pretending, the fake objectivity, and that there was a real craving for something authentic and real. And even in my old job on, cable news, you couldn't be quite as authentic as you can be in the digital lane. They would not have supported me saying who I voted for. It would have been considered really coloring outside the lines to do such a thing. I certainly would not have been allowed to go to a Trump rally on stage and ask people to vote for him. That would have been considered a no-no. But I love being free to do and say those things in this lane. I love being free to swear if I want to swear. I love being free to wrestle with things and then come back the next day and say, I think I got it wrong. I screwed that up. Or with the guest, work through a tough issue and have somebody convince me I'm wrong. There's no time for any of that in the cable news context. And it's just the whole system is not set up. Can I swear on this podcast? I already did.
Absolutely. Hell is in the name.
Okay.
We actually have an explicit rating because of that.
Just today, we were talking about how there's that one Congressman Garcia who's like, Elon Musk is a dick. And he's like, and I'm going to call him that. And okay, all right, big swinging. And so he goes on with some CNN anchor. I think it's Brianna, whatever. I don't really know them anymore. But she was like, why did you feel that it was appropriate to call him a dick? I was like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. If you're going to say it. Like, lean in a little, sister. Otherwise, we all feel so uncomfortable. Please make it stop. Like, you can't have those conversations there. Whereas on podcast, you can just, if you're an authentic person who says that word, you can do it and everybody knows it and you can get away with it because they know it's who you are. There's just very little room for faking it.
Yeah. It seems like the media is just one example of the institutions that have just completely destroyed their trust with the public. They breathlessly gave us the Mueller, the Russia collusion conspiracy theory, and then never gave back their Pulitzers when it turned out to be nothing but a conspiracy theory. They told us that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. It turned out it wasn't. There were so many lies that they told. Then you've got people, I know you've done a lot of investigating into RFK Jr.'s views on vax and everything like that, but people go out and say, well, RFK Jr., he's kind of a nut. And then people say, well, who? Who says that? Well, the public health establishment. Oh, the people who told us to shut down the schools and the people who told us that we all had to have vaccine mandates. And then, Tulsi Gabbard, I'm not a fan of Tulsi Gabbard at all. I don't think she's qualified for the job, but people say, why is Tulsi Gabbard, can she get confirmed? Well, maybe because the intelligence community conspired with Facebook and all the platforms to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop and told us it was Russian disinformation. All these institutions, FBI, how can Kash Patel be the head of the FBI? He's not qualified. Well, who's qualified? The people who raided Mar-a-Lago, the people who told us that, there's so many institutions have utterly beclowned themselves. And then you wonder, why is Donald Trump president? Why is RFK Jr. health secretary? Why is Tulsi Gabbard DNI? It's because people don't trust the institutions and they elected somebody to go in and smash them.
That's absolutely right. Agree with every word. And the media's role in it is very significant. And they have self-immolated as a result of all this coverage. I mean, it was not without consequence. I'll give you one other. Pete Hegseth, who's been accused of rape, a charge he denies, now our defense secretary. That, okay, technically that would be a true statement. But do any of these journalists take the time to actually go look at the alleged rape report, pull the police report, read it cover to cover, every single page? It's long. And if you do, you will find out that the woman who, quote, accused him of rape was claiming that she was given a date rape drug by Pete, that he must have slipped it to her at midnight, and that by 4 a.m. she was back in her hotel room with her own husband, who was down the hall from the love nest she had with Pete, who said she wasn't drunk, she looked totally fine. There's an eyewitness who saw her at 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. who said she didn't look drunk at all. She was totally fine. They had verbal interactions with her. She's on tape 3 times between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., looking completely fine, together, on it, not in any way drugged or drunk. And that takes us to 2 a.m. when her alleged interlude was with Pete. So between 2 and 4, he slipped her a date rape drug, according to this person. And then she went home to her husband, who said she was totally fine at 4. That's his alleged rape victim, again, who was with her husband and toddlers in a hotel room down the hall, who was obviously just too embarrassed to admit she cheated on the man in the same hotel as their family. It was a massive slip by this woman, in my opinion, but she made up the rape charge, and it's very obvious. Where's that in your report, CBS, or anybody else, right? They just smear you and move on, and people have gotten used to the game.
So here's the downside of it, though, okay? I agree with everything you just said. So I write for the Washington Post in addition to being on Fox and the rest of it. What I like about being in the Washington Post, and they have more conservative writers than people think. Got Ramesh and we got Jim Garrity and a bunch of guys that you and I both like. They consciously try to bring us in pro-Trump views into the paper. But because I'm in an ecosystem where people who disagree with me are confronted with my words all the time. Right. And what I worry about is the stovepiping of the information systems in the country. That, okay, the digital age has allowed everybody to find their own little stovepipe, their own little information flow, and there's no cross currents at all. And so you have half the country in its own little echo chamber where, I mean, like, if during the whole Biden presidency, if you just watch MSNBC and listen to who are those left-wing podcasts or the Pod Save America guys, you wouldn't have known there was a border crisis.
No,
but if you would have
thought that he was going to win,
listen to the Megyn Kelly show, you would know, right? And so we're becoming two, to that awful famous phrase, we're becoming two Americas, except we're becoming two Americas with completely different sets of facts because we're not talking to each other. That's the downside of it.
I don't think you have to worry about that. And there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, I think conservatives will always have their ideas challenged because while you may be consuming media at your place of choice and, you may be consuming only media that tells you what you want to hear in the worst cases, you still have to live in this world. You still have to go to your kid's school. You have to go to the movies. You turn on regular TV. You turn on the radio. You go to a sports game. You interview for a job. Those are all leftists. You are forced to interview or be around or consume leftist information, whether you want to or not, as someone of the right. Now, the leftists, different story. That everything is stovepipe for them, the way it always has been. I just think the difference now is that conservatives have places to go. They're ubiquitous now. There's so many choices, whereas before they used to only have Fox, really. And now it's been democratized on the right as well. And the second thing is, even if it's the worst case scenario where everybody is stovepiped and they never interact with somebody of the other side, I just think we're going to be fine. It's kind of how media used to be in this country, 100 years ago. And it was very partisan, and people knew that they were picking up their own partisan point of view, and they liked it, and we managed to survive 250 years. So I think we're good.
I hope you're right. I want to ask you about something else because I think one of the things that the three of us and a lot of people in our ecosystem have in common is we like politics. We like the push, the pull. We like learning about the other side and what people think. I think there is a curiosity about it. We have a scholar at AEI who writes for the Free Press. He writes for the publication he founded called the Liberal Patriot. Now, I know the D's are furious with them, but
Rui Teixeira.
Rui Teixeira. I think Nate Silver does the same thing too. Talks a lot about, hey, here's what went wrong in the election. Hey, here's what went wrong in the Biden years. Hey, here's what's going wrong with the media, the education system, and all of these other things. The information is out there. What is striking to me is how, having watched the Democratic National Committee elections, OMFG, right? It is like they're in a cone of silence. And they're not hearing their friends, because these guys are not Republicans. These are not, Mark Thiessen, Megyn Kelly, Fox News listeners, right? These are people who want to help their party. And yet there is an immunity inside the party that means that they don't want to admit there's an immigration problem, a crime problem, an inflation problem, a Biden problem, a
A
Kamala
woke problem.
Yeah.
Right? So what do you think? I mean, as someone who's in this business and gets this, what's this about?
I mean, I find it kind of amusing, to be honest, that they can't get out of their own way. And as somebody who votes mostly on the other side, I think it's awesome because they're just never going to actually problem solve over there. They've been given all the information. I mean, I really think they're infected with, yes, the woke mind virus, but there's more than one virus in that infected brain on the left. And yes, the failure to understand what's happening at the southern border and what it means for them politically is one of them. The obsession with abortion is another one. The identity politics should be like glaring. It should be glaring and in their faces because more and more of their own party are saying we need to get rid of this because a lot of Democrats are not woke. Most of my friends who are Democrats, my New York friends, my friends who I went to college with, they're non-woke Democrats. They want to excise that cancer from their party, but they can't. They can't. So they have been vocal, unlike things like the border, which they all kind of just ignore because it's like, oh, we're a people that accepts immigrants. You know, they're still playing the Statue of Liberty card. But on the woke mind virus, they see it. The regular Dems, the normies, see it and have been jumping up and down about it, even before the election in some cases, but definitely since. And it's too late. It's metastasized. You know, the pancreas is completely enveloped with the very damaging cells. I'm sorry. It's too late. They can't do it. That thing with the DNC, how many non-binaries do we have? I mean, forget it. You're unsalvageable at this point. The View, look, spend 1 hour, I implore you, watching.
No.
Do it. It tells you everything you need to know about Democrat politics. They can't get this infection out of their bloodstream. It makes them feel like good people. They're used to judging everyone through this superior lens that lets them be the heroes no matter what they do behind closed doors and lets all of us be the terrible racist, bigots, sexist, whatever and they can't let go of it. So it will be the end of them. It's like a pancreatic cancer. It won't shrink. They aren't even focusing the cancer laser on it. And that's in addition to all the other problems. So the patient is terminal. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, it's a shame for all of us because we do better when we have two parties that are actually
Normal.
fighting with good ideas.
Oh, we
as
have that.
opposed to-
We have that. We have the neocon Republicans and the Trump Republicans.
Hello, how do you do? So I want to ask you, just following up on that, is this one of the reasons why you've got a new project? And I want to know, A, will you tell us about it? And B, why did you start it?
Thank you. Yeah, well, the audience was actually asking for it. And I was like, it's a good idea. They said, it'd be so great if you would do a morning update for us with just the quick news of the day that we need to know. 15 minutes. Just what does Megyn Kelly think we need to know going into this day? And I was like, that actually is a really good idea because I think people consume the podcast at their leisure. They enjoy it. They hear a deeper discussion of the news. They're entertained. It's kind of a fun, informative way to get the news. But some days you want to go off to work or to school just knowing what are the big headlines you need to know, especially in the Trump era when it's the fire hose of news. So we're doing it. We're putting together, and it takes a lot of hours to put together a 15-minute tight, good broadcast. So I brought in a new executive producer for that show and a new staff for that show. And we're kind of working on both, and we'll record it as late at night as I can stay awake. Or if there's too much happening, then we'll do it early morning, but we're going to release it at 6 a.m. on Monday through Friday.
That's so awesome. Well, one of the things that I when I was watching you and listening to you first and then watching you on your podcast, we were talking about the woke mind virus, and it feels a little bit in this country like the fever broke, over this, at least not for the Democratic Party, but for the rest of the country. Because I remember you've been on the leading edge of this whole fighting this gender ideology stuff. And I'm the father of a girl hockey player. So I am 100% down with no boys and women's sports, all the rest of it. But you started talking about this, and I would almost cringe a little bit listening because I was like, oh my God, I can't believe Megyn's saying what I think, but she's saying it. She's saying it on a podcast. And it's like, it was almost like it took a lot of courage to say some of the things you said because, they would say, oh, you're a bigot and you're a racist. Yep. And then all of a sudden it seems like everybody has just stopped saying the emperor has no clothes and stopped pretending. And it's okay now to say, no, actually there shouldn't be. And it became almost the winning issue for Trump in the election, that ad at the end.
It
she's
was the
for they,
winning
them,
issue.
and when he's for you, was the most effective ad, maybe one of the most effective presidential ads ever. I mean, talk to a little bit about has the virus broken?
Yeah, you raise a good point. It's broken amongst the rest of us, like not even just Republicans, but
70,
everyone.
80%.
Yeah, everybody who isn't woke, who was
Yeah.
just pretending, and then the people who are begrudgingly going along with it. It's broken. Trump's given everybody permission to just be normal again. Ironically, right? Because they said he was the one who was anti all the norms. He'd just be normal again and not play these games. So the point at which I knew it was breaking, like that we were awakening from this nightmare, was with Caitlin Clark, the WNBA player. And she's beloved, everybody. She's amazing. She's incredibly talented. She's like the female Michael Jordan. And they decided to feature her as Times Athlete of the Year. And in her profile, she actually apologized for her white privilege. And immediately, her fans, I mean, I was one of the people who criticized her, but it was her fans who were like, oh no. And what you kept seeing all over X and all over social media was, we just won a whole election, so we don't have to do this. And that was just one tell. But every day in the paper, just this morning, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, they were talking about how all the major banks are rolling way back their DEI programs. All the websites are being scrubbed of it. The programs themselves are being scrubbed. They're not touting it anymore. The Human Rights Campaign is laying people off. That's the scold that's been scaring all of corporate America if they don't do everything that they want them to do, especially in the trans field. So they've lost, and Trump is our avatar for that defeat. Electing him for some meant closing the border. For some, it meant, keeping taxes low and actually reviving our economic policies and our grocery store prices. But for some of us, it meant killing DEI and gender insanity once and for all, because we elected the biggest middle finger the United States has had in modern history, our hero, who from the beginning, speaking of that debate, Mark, when I asked him about his language about women, from the beginning knew he wasn't going to get tripped up by any of that crap, and has been our leader on it ever since.
That's fascinating. I know you're tight for time, but I want to ask you, watching Trump now over the last month, a little bit less, it's scorched earth. Executive orders here, left, right, center, people being fired, things being changed, things being rolled back, things being stopped. Take over Gaza, take the Palestinians and put them in Ukraine, bring Greenland over and adopt it instead of Canada. I can't keep up. But, you talk about this all the time. You've tracked him for a long time. What makes you nervous?
Nothing. I feel
Really?
relaxed and happy and thrilled for the first time in a long time. I love what he is doing. And I think, unlike many, I see what he is doing. I see it pretty clearly. I don't know that Trump actually wants Greenland, but he wants to get a conversation started. I don't know that he actually wants Canada to be our 51st state.
I don't.
But he gets a conversation started.
Yes.
He makes people talk about it. And it's very clever, because people start to think, like, why does he want Canada to be the 51st state? Oh, it's because they're mooching off of us. It's because he's sick and tired of the unfair trade situation and them not cracking down on the border in the way he wants. He starts these ideas that are easy for you to hold on to. And a talker, as we say in the news, like, you would not normally be like, there is a trade deficit when it comes to our upstairs neighbor, Canada and the United States. That must be addressed. But it's like, he's calling him Governor Trudeau. That's a talker. And Trump's an expert at marketing and messaging, so he's very effective. Remember what happened with the first impeachment? It was a perfect phone call, a perfect phone call. Remember the perfect phone call? That's all he kept saying, and he gets it in your head. So I think people kind of forget to factor that in when they look at Trump talking about the Ghazi era. I think he's changing the conversation. It's like a reset button. And then you're just looking at the whole situation differently in a way you've never seen it before. Some of these things may come to fruition, most won't, but Trump will move the whole conversation markedly, materially, in his direction. And it's happened time and time again, and that's how I interpret most of what he's doing.
Yeah, that perfect phone call, by the way, is why he loves Zelensky, because Zelensky saved him in the first impeachment. He actually people have this misimpression of where he is on Ukraine. Like he's not with the
No, he's not.
anti-Ukraine forces. He wants he wants Ukraine to be a sovereign country. He wants to save them, and I think people use him as an avatar for their views on it, but he's very much more complicated on that.
I think he is on Ukraine the place he has been on Israel, which is, as he said openly about Israel, like 2 months or a month before the election. Time to wrap it up now.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where he stands. The terms can be negotiated. I definitely think his heart is more with the Ukrainians and he understands what happened there. But he also doesn't demonize Putin as this evil figure with whom he cannot speak, negotiate, meet. And that's good for the United States. And I happen to agree with him on that. It's like, it doesn't do us any good to talk about what an evil man Putin is. He can be dealt with. He can be negotiated with. And for all intents and purposes, that should be our goal now. I think we have a much bigger threat in China that we should be talking to Putin about and not letting them get too close. But that's my own view. But I think you're right that Trump is not perfectly aligned with, my friend Tucker or even maybe JD when it comes to Ukraine. I think he's got a foot in your camp, Mark.
Yep, he's not an isolationist. The guy bombed Syria twice for using chemical weapons. He killed Soleimani. I mean,
yes, exactly.
But here's the other difference with Trump. So when you were describing sort of the way he's this marketing genius. The difference between the first term and this one is he seems to be much more of a happy warrior this time around. Because I think the first term, it was Russia collusion conspiracy theory, not my president. They were out to destroy him. And now they fired every weapon they have at him. And like Marvel superhero, the dust and clouds have parted and there he is standing unscathed and winning, right? And I think he's doing the same things, but he's doing it with a twinkle in his eye. He seems to, Kamala Harris promised us joy. He campaigned with joy, the McDonald's thing, the garbage truck, and all of these things. Like when he says the stuff about Trudeau, it's like he's smiling, he's kind of laughing, and everybody likes that. It's different than in the first term when he was sort of yelling at reporters at the press briefing room and, and getting into fights with the left.
And was hated by Republicans. I mean, the first term, he was hated by many Republicans, too. I mean, he was elected, but he didn't own the party the way he does now.
Yeah.
He hadn't remade it in his own image. I think a couple of things. I think Trump has matured as a president. I think all those experiences you mentioned did have an effect on him, both personally and professionally. And I do think Trump believes he was saved in that assassination attempt for something important, to return to the presidency and do something profound. I believe he believes that. And I think, secondly, the genuine love of the country that's behind him right now, which he does have the majority of, I think he feels it. He knows he's too smart. His EQ is too smart for him not to feel it. Because the one thing you can't say about Trump is that he cannot read a room. He can. He's very good at reading people and reading how they feel about him. And so he knows it's a sincere love and people are sincerely rooting for him and deeply need him right now. And having emerged through those fires, superhero-like, I think he feels a benevolence, I actually can help these people. I was returned here for a reason. My life is great. He's very close with his family, which speaks so well of him. I mean, he's very tight with his children. It's a special thing that, as you guys know, if you can keep your relationship tight with your family, it can make you immune to outside criticism. It can be an empowering source. And they're doing well now too. So I think we've gotten a different version of Trump. He's still a fighter. He's never going to stop with the tweets here and there and all like the barbs. They're funny actually when he was like, Hamas, they should just move out along with Chuck Schumer. What? So he's never going to change that. But that's part of his sense of humor, part of what we kind of like about him. But I think we've gotten the absolute best version of Donald Trump that ever existed. And he happens to be in the White House this time, so it's great.
That's awesome. Well, we are so glad that you're doing your pod. I miss those 4 years when you're not on the air, and I am so glad that I get to tune in. Even if I can't be on the air with you, though I get to do it now, I get to listen every day and hear what you're thinking, and it brings me back to the old Kelly File days. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for everything, Mark. I miss you a ton, and I'm so glad to see you thriving so much like you are. Danny, you too. So nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming.
So Danny, what do you think?
So, look, I think Megyn is marvelous. She has a real way with her, and I think that she does her homework, which is important. I actually worry more than she does about the very question you asked. And because you and I are at a nerdy think tank, the data is worrisome. This is about people who don't talk to people who disagree with them. In fact, over the last few years, what we've seen is that people curate their information. There's massive confirmation bias, so they're only enjoying things that they agree with. But in a really, really interesting study that was published either last year or the year before, really high percentage of people didn't actually know people who disagreed with them.
Wow.
This is why, on the Substack, people come in and they're obnoxious and they're jerks and they can be rude. But my view is, if you're reading this, I really appreciate that because you disagree with me and you're making an effort here. All right. So I do think this is problematic. And I think obviously she's a happy warrior, but I do think that there's a lot of people who only listen to Pod Save America and don't really know who Megyn Kelly is. And there are a lot of Megyn Kelly people who have no clue who Pod Save America is. Not that I like Pod Save America, I should add.
Well, I should add that I've never listened to Pod Save America, so I guess I'm doing the same thing.
I know
I
those
listen to the
guys.
Megyn Kelly show. But I mean, I know this because I'm in their ecosystem because I write for the Washington Post.
And I liked what you said about that.
Yeah. But if you read my comment section, which by the way, my editors, when I first joined the Post 15 years ago, Fred Hyatt, I asked him, what's your best advice for me as a new Post columnist? And he said, don't read the comments.
Oh yeah.
and I pretty much followed that for a long time. But there's a lot of people who hate my way, and every year there's a campaign to fire me. It's like they don't want me in their ecosystem. They don't like having contrarian views in their ecosystem. And so I think it's a heroic thing to try and save institutions like the Washington Post opinion page, because I think it's important that we have a place where actually different opinions come together and people who don't necessarily agree with each other are forced to read other points of view and come into contact with other points of view.
Absolutely.
I just think that I think there's room for all of it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Look, this is why I have tried over the years to write stuff with people from Center for American Progress, from George Soros's Open Society Foundation, because there are things that we can agree on. When I was on the Hill, I never did anything without telling my Democratic counterpart, because it's just not worth it. Don't be a jerk. Tell them, don't make them look stupid in front of their boss. Don't sneak around. If they're going to fight you, they're going to fight you one way or the other. And I much prefer an open fight. Yeah. The other thing that I was interested in was, and Megyn's a lawyer. She's not just a public figure and a public speaker and a pundit. She's obviously well-educated and practiced for many years as a lawyer. And when I asked her, are you worried about anything? I guess for me, where I would really worry if I was Donald Trump is the ephemeral nature of so much of what he's doing, because he's doing it by executive order. Yeah. Right? I mean, if you want to change America, you need the law.
Yeah. I think that's true, but I think it's also what we saw during the Biden years is you can change America a lot with your pen and your paper, and your phone. And they changed the culture. They destroyed the border. They destroyed Afghanistan. they wreaked havoc on the world. Invited 2 wars on 2 continents. You can do a lot without legislation. And I think Trump's got, I think our last count, Ben sent us the latest list of EOs. I think he's at 93 executive orders. And some of them are just fun, banning paper straws and bringing back plastic straws.
Gulf of America.
God bless that. God bless Donald Trump. I think what Trump has right now, which is something that he was denied in his first term, is a political honeymoon. Right? Every president, when they get elected, they got a period of time where they've got a mandate from the voters and they go off and they start implementing their agenda. And then at a certain point, the honeymoon ends and the rough slog begins. And I think he didn't get that in his first term because everyone was questioning the legitimacy of his presidency and saying that he had conspired with Putin to steal the presidency. And it took 2 years for the Mueller probe to say, no, that didn't actually happen. And then there was the impeachments and everything else. And I think the smoke is cleared from all that. That's all. I mean, they tried everything
They did.
they
They
could
threw
to
every
destroy
bit of
him,
shit against the wall.
and it failed. And not only did it fail, he's stronger now than he ever was because he came back from all of that, and he got a popular vote victory, a swing state sweep, a unified control of government,
He's the Teflon Don.
and he's victorious, right?
I'm very
And
pleased
so
with
and
my
so
Teflon Don. Sorry.
and so he's happy. And he's a happy warrior, and he's laughing and he's trolling people, but he's not doing it in an angry way. I think he had right reasons to be angry in his first term, but he's not the angry Trump of the first term. He's sort of a joyful Trump with all the strengths and flaws that he had before, but a little bit more knowledge of how the government works, a little bit more skip in his step because they've failed to destroy him, and a mandate from the voters to go and shake things up. And so he's shaking things up. And
Well,
good.
that he is. That he is.
But at
for
some point, he's going to
sure.
have to pass legislation, right?
Yeah. Right, and Congress needs to, look. I was having drinks with our colleague Gary last night, and we were chatting about all of this stuff, and I just said, for me, the idea that the president uses his pen and his executive authority to the utmost is something that I think the founders in some ways envisioned. I think that courts adjudicating questions of whether he's overstepping the guardrails is exactly what was envisioned for the courts. What the part of government that just isn't doing its job is Congress. And I love Congress. Congress for me is the closest thing to the American
You're
people.
one of 6% of the country who does.
I know, right? No kidding. But I mean, guys, do some freaking legislation.
Yeah.
Stomp on some of the things that you don't agree with, and don't let, as much as he may want to, and the public may want him to, don't let Donald Trump trample on your prerogatives. Why? Because the next Democratic president will do it too. And this is the thing. Congress has just basically abdicated its responsibility in protecting its prerogatives. I don't get it, because there are a lot of good people up there, and they just seem supine.
Well, you know what? There's an element of, because Trump is victorious, there's a bit of pressure on. There's always the party when a president is elected to, now it's his second term, but it's really a new term, to support him, right? To defer to the president at the start of his term to help him be successful. And so I don't think you should expect a lot of people to be standing up and challenging him on too much. So thank God they did, and we got rid of Matt Gaetz.
No kidding. But we should have gotten rid of RFK too, and Tulsi.
Yes, I know, but I understand why people are not doing that, even if I
they're
disagree
gut
with all of
wonders
them.
of the 21st century. Well, that's why. Anyway, it was amazing. I loved having Megyn on. I know she came for you and not for me, but I get to enjoy it notwithstanding. Let's have her back. And for everybody who hasn't enjoyed the fresh air that she puts out there every week and now every morning, my God, go over there and listen. She's on all the same platforms we are. So thanks for being with us.
Take care. Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. You can get in touch with the show by emailing us at whatthehell@aei.org.
Or you can reach us on Twitter. I'm at @dpletka.
And I'm at Mark Thiessen. That's Mark with a C.
Please rate and review the podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe, share it, comment on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this.
Thanks for listening.